tell us a little bit about just you growing up, where you came from, and your story, so we can get a little bit of that background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you for having me. Hello to all the members of the Nexstar Nation that showed up today. I appreciate all of that. I also want to say a special hello to all the students in the audience. I certainly understand the appeal of a free meal as an undergraduate student, but I also appreciate the fact that you took time out of your schedule to come and spend some time and listen. And so hopefully we'll make that worth your while. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania. It was kind of a strip mining town and came from a very blue-collar background. Second in my family to go to college. My mother went to college at Penn State back in the day. And so it was a very ordinary upbringing, I think. My dad never made more than $50,000. He was in a blue-collar job, but he and my mother both knew the value of education and offered to pay for secondary education or post-high school graduation for myself and my brother. My brother took the money and bought a car, but I decided to take the money and make the investment in higher education. And my chosen field was radio and television. My first job in this industry was in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which is famous exactly one day a year, home of the groundhog. And I was still in high school at the time, so I just stayed in that business my entire career, and went to school for it. Got a degree in communications, which was an emphasis in radio and television, and an emphasis in management. Even though I did spend some time as a news anchor, I realized very quickly that on-air talent is not a title that should be used universally, because I was on air, but I don't think I had a whole lot of on-air talent. And also chose to go into the management side of the business, and the sales side of the business was the quickest path to future advancement there. So I think from my perspective, our family was had very, very strong values, was a fairly strict family. Faith was an important part of of our life. Accountability was an important part of our life, and I look back on it and say, that may have been kind of a sheltered upbringing, but I didn't know much different at the time, right? That just was what it was. But then I found out what everybody else in my high school was doing that I had no idea about. And then I realized there's a whole wide world out there that I didn't know a lot about. But I think it was a strong underpinning. My dad had a very strong work ethic. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and placed her time and effort into growing two knucklehead boys, and so I think that was a good grounding for me. And I tell people all the time that I started Nexstar in a converted Kresge's department store. Now, for those of you not old enough to know Kresge's or know what it is or who it is, Kresge's was the predecessor to Kmart. So this was an old-timey department store on Lackawanna Avenue in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I tell people, particularly when I go to visit Washington, I said, this is about as far from the media elite as you can get when you start a TV station in an old department store. So I think my ordinary upbringing was a grounding in the values, and not to forget about the people that not only watch us, but the people that are in our communities that we're there to serve. And that, media elite is a term that gets used a lot, and there is a media elite out there. And when we founded and I started News Nation, which is a national cable network, I said, we're going to focus on the people that are not on the coasts, that are in the flyover states, the forgotten parts of America, and celebrate that and tell those stories, and also try and make sense of what's happening in New York or Washington to the rest of the country. And I think my upbringing, provided that emphasis for me to make sure that we were representing the part of America that I came from.
Can I ask you about Kissimmee, Florida?
Okay. Yeah.
Is there a story there?
Well, so, you have these forks in the road, right? So I went to school with this kid called Matt Lauer, who you may have heard of, used to anchor the Today Show. He was famous until he was infamous, but he and I, we went to school, and he went into the news business. He and I ended up working at the same TV station after graduation, and I was in sales. It was, and funny enough, now we own that TV station in Huntington, West Virginia. But before that, in the summertime, I was working in a small TV station as a news anchor, and realized that this probably was not going to be a career for me, being in front of the camera. And I got offered 2 jobs on the same day. One was with a bunch of other kids from college to go out to Flagstaff, Arizona, and we were going to staff up a newsroom, and I was going to be the weekend anchor and weekday reporter, and my buddy was going to be the sports director. I was best man at his wedding, and all of that, and that was going to be fun. And then I got offered a job to sell radio time in Orlando, Florida, for 25% commission. And those of you that sell TV time or radio time, 25% commission is unheard of. Well, turns out so was the radio station. But so the radio station was in Kissimmee, Florida, which at that time, this was in the late 70s. Disney World hadn't grown out that far. In fact, they had just opened the main park, and the other pieces didn't exist yet. So it was a lot of flat land. And the radio station was an AM daytimer, which meant it signed off when the sun went down, and it just changed its format from big bands to country. So there was no audience, limited number of people that could listen to them. But and so my first week on the job, I made the biggest sale they ever had in the history of the radio station, regardless of format. Was a mobile home dealer that I sold, and when it came time after he paid his bill for the owner to pay me commission, I got a part at the transmitter I got to replace. I'll pay you next week, and then the next week became next week, and next week became the month after, and so I decided his major asset to me was using his telephone to find another job, which I did. But that was my brief time in Kissimmee, Florida.
So there's successes and failures all along the way. Can you explain to us, because I truly don't understand, but the purchase of stations throughout the nation, sometimes you can't own 2 stations in one town. Sometimes you can manage it. Can you explain kind of the process of how you went about acquiring and then managing some stations as well?
Sure. I had to ask Albert Gutierrez to come up because he lives this every day in managing a KSAN as well as owning and running KTAB. But so the FCC rules and regulations, we're operating basically under the same rules and regulations in both radio and television that we were in the 1940s, the 1970s. And as we all know, nothing's changed in media since then. But it says that you can't own 2 of the top 4 TV stations in any community. And so, KSAN and KTAB would both qualify for that. So we have another company that we support financially that owns the license of that station, but we entered into joint advertising sales agreements. We provide facilities, for one another. News production comes out of the same building, even though it's 2 different studios and 2 different anchor teams and points of view. And so it's a way to mine an economic benefit out of a second station in the marketplace without actually owning the FCC license. Now, I don't know who still believes that, owning 2 TV stations in Abilene, Texas is going to give us so much power that we're just going to run Facebook out of the marketplace or, run Google off the air. When you look at the world we compete in today, there's more digital advertising revenue spent in Abilene, Texas than there is in television by a factor of almost 4 times. So the idea that there's market concentration in local television is kind of hard to defend, but there are plenty of people who just defend the status quo, even though the quo's lost its status, as I like to say. But we have found a way to, kind of work under the current rules. Now, the good news is, at least for us, is that the 8th Circuit Court just said that the top 4 prohibition is arbitrary and capricious and threw the law out. So here, as soon as the government reopens and they start publishing things in the Federal Register, that'll become law, and that will remove one of the impediments in the, to entry for us. But it's kind of a hybrid existence, but it was a way to grow the company and take advantage of opportunities because what we see is, I don't want to get too wonky while we're here for what we hope is a lighthearted and enjoyable lunch. But if you look at where you get your local journalism from, and you may watch it on TikTok, or you may watch it on YouTube or something like that.
I think TikTok is right. It lasts about that long.
But in terms of who produces that content, who creates the stories, who reports on them, it's local broadcast. There's not much local news on local radio. Now, we own one radio station. It's a very good one in Chicago, but not a lot of local news and local newspapers. It's a much different business than it used to be. In fact, when we announced the acquisition of Tegna, I was in Dallas, flying to San Diego that day, and I picked up the Dallas Morning News, and the story that was written about the acquisition was a reprint of a Reuters story. So there was no local reporting on that, on a big acquisition for a big company based in North Texas. I get out to San Diego, where we had just acquired a TV station, and we were having a big open house for clients, and I looked at the story they had written on the acquisition, because there's a Tegna station in San Diego as well, and it was written by the Associated Press. And so I like to believe, and I think it has the added benefit of being true, that local television journalism is really the last bastion of journalism in local communities. And I tell this in Washington. I said, you don't want your news delivered by a chatbot, do you? Because if you don't allow local journalism to be supported by companies, allowing them to get bigger and maintain the resources that we invest into this medium, local journalism could just go away, and it'll be exactly what Google or YouTube would tell you that it is. That's the news. It's on a chatbot. You hope what they say is true, and you hope the chatbot is based somewhere in the United States. And I'm not a sky is falling kind of a guy, but from my perspective, that's the cliff that we're on. And so why consolidation? Why allow me to own, TV stations reaching in 80% of the country? Because I want to be able to compete with Netflix for NFL games. And I can't do that when the current rule says you can't own TV stations that reach more than 39% of the country. How that number was arrived at is, put your finger in the wind, and that's probably how it was come up with. There's no way to defend that. I said, at least allow me to compete a level playing field across the United States, a bigger company, a stronger company that can continue to support, defend, and grow local journalism. And we have a very good track record. Our company, Nexstar, we own 200 TV stations across the country, or operate them through our sharing arrangements with Mission and other affiliated entities. And we produce about 30% more local news on those TV stations than they were doing at the time of acquisition. So a lot of times putting two TV stations, news operations together in the same building allows one or the other to survive. And that's really the choice. You're not losing a voice. You're maintaining a voice for the local community. And our business is very simple. We're a local service business, even though we do $5.5 billion of revenue and just a big company. We produce local content that hopefully is relevant, interesting to the local community, and we help local businesses sell stuff. That's our reason to exist. What do I spend the most time talking to investors about? How's your affiliation with the networks, and how's your distribution with satellite and all that, which is part of our business, but it's not our core reason to exist. And I think if you boil it all off, I think there's a vested interest in maintaining our ability to produce local content for our communities and to provide an avenue for businesses to reach consumers. And that's at our essence what we do.
So your true competition is probably just social media out there, as opposed to maybe a local in-town television station. It's advanced that far that you have new competition coming in versus that old law that was put into place before then. Gotcha. You mentioned chatbot, but AI. How is AI affecting your industry?
Well, we're using AI primarily in business processes, mundane things like reconciling invoices and payments and things like that. I was exposed to a product last week that could help newsrooms. Our assignment editor, when he shows up or she shows up every morning, calls around to every police department and says, anything happened overnight, anything I should know about? Well, AI can gather that information for you, and rather than spending an hour doing it, you can have it in like 10 minutes. we will never have an AI anchor as long as I'm running the company. We will never have an AI journalist trying to do the work of journalists. I think we can use it as a tool for research, but it's not going to be a substitute for the people that are known and trusted in the local communities, because that's really our franchise. And it would be very short-sighted to try and save your way to prosperity by eliminating, local journalists.
I do want to take a little sidestep. Baseball?
Mm-hmm.
Pirates?
Well, that's kind of my motivation to get into the business. Is I wanted to be the play-by-play announcer for the Pittsburgh Pirates when I grew up, because we had a very colorful announcer by the name of Bob Prince, who was probably known as much for his antics out of the booth as he was in the booth. But I quickly realized that to get to Pittsburgh, you'd have to start in Fort Wayne and go to Charleston and maybe go to Harrisburg, and maybe then you get to Pittsburgh. And I was just too impatient for that. I also realized my brief time I spent in talent is that you got a lot of bosses, right? The viewers have an opinion. Your boss has an opinion. Salespeople have an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. And I one of the reasons I started my own company is because I felt I didn't like taking direction from all that many people. So I kind of wanted to be my own boss.
So the deal with Tegna, it's likely to happen, not going to happen. I don't know if you can even comment on that, but it sounds like it's moving along.
It would move a little further if the government were open right now. We have two regulatory processes we have to go through, and one is with the DOJ, Department of Justice, antitrust concerns. It gets to your question of is owning two TV stations enabling too much market power, and I don't think anybody can defend that with a straight face. The other is at the FCC. We are prepared to file 37 license applications because we have to transfer their licenses from Tegna's name into our name. And you have to show that doing that would be in the public interest. And I don't mind being held to a public interest standard, and we are. And the irony is that none of social media, digital media is held to any kind of a standard about obscene or indecent content, disclosing who buys their political ads, providing fair and balanced, debate and conversation. So I'm fine being held to those rules. Just let me get bigger so that I can compete with them on a level playing field, even though I'm regulated. But I digress. But we, and as a public company, there's very little I can say. But as soon as the government reopens, we will file our FCC documentation. I've read the filing. It runs several hundred pages, but I think it presents a very good case as to why this transaction should be approved. And I've been to Washington 12 times so far this year. Not my most favorite part of my job, but meeting with folks on the Hill as well as the regulatory community to explain what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and generally have had very positive receptions. I've been in the West Wing of the White House. I've talked to anyone who will take a meeting with me to explain why this is good for the industry and good for the country.
If this doesn't happen for television stations, is a precursor what happened to the newspapers?
Well, that's what we've been saying. I've been saying in Washington is if you want to see what happens if you wait too long to deregulate an industry, look at newspapers, and newspapers are a shadow of their former selves because they were not allowed to merge with other communicators in a local marketplace. And again, that's just outmoded thinking. And as I said, we're at the top of the ski slope. I can see where it goes if nothing changes. And so we're hopeful that this transaction will be a catalyst. Our CFO coined a term that I really like. She says we're meeting the regulatory moment where it is, and we're trying to push on an open door here. The regulators, and particularly the party in power, has invited us to make the case for this transaction. They want to deregulate. They want to create more opportunities for business. And you can say what you will, this is not meant to be, a political discussion at all, but, they are the party in power, and they are hopefully going to be supportive of this transaction. But it will come down to the merits, and the regulatory agencies will be the ones that will decide.
You talked about party in power in politics, and I can assume that television stations are all many times involved on both sides. But Jimmy Kimmel, that's been a question I wanted to ask you for a while. not.
You're not alone.
Am I getting a scoop here? I hope so. I don't even know what that is. I'm more interested in the thought process that you have to go through to make those major decisions. For me, for us, there's leaders in this room, there's students who will be leaders. How do you make hard decisions and make good hard decisions?
Well, you make hard decisions and you hope they're good, right? And it's got to be the benefit of your faith, your knowledge, and the sum total of who you are and what it says about you. Listen, we did not take the move lightly. A little bit of background, I really didn't know a lot about Charlie Kirk before all of this happened. We own the ABC affiliate in Salt Lake City, Utah, that provides ABC coverage to the entire state of Utah where this assassination took place. Listen, the late night hosts, I grew up on Johnny Carson and Craig Ferguson and David Letterman, and they all made fun, but they, we air these shows on our air, and I can't watch late night comedy anymore because it's not comedy, right? It's I go to bed more fired up and then I can't fall asleep. So I said, I'll put on a rerun of Seinfeld or something, but I don't know. Anyway, what really started was we were hearing from people in our communities, and our ABC affiliates are in Salt Lake City. They're in Erie, Pennsylvania. And, so we're not in LA or New York or Chicago with ABC affiliates. And we began to hear from viewers and advertisers. They were just, and particularly in Utah, they said, this is just wrong. What he said was untrue. And we can debate that, I get, and it was insensitive. It was just too soon. It was abrasive. It was like rubbing salt into a wound. And what I thought showed a disregard for the people in the flyover states that may think differently about things than he did. And one of the things as a broadcast licensee, we hold our license in the public interest. And there's this in every network affiliation contract, there is this provision of right to reject. We have the right to reject programming if we feel that it either doesn't meet our community standards or we have a program of greater importance. So you could preempt a primetime show for a local news special or election results or things like that. My management team brought to me and said, this is just gone sideways in our communities, and people are irate about this, and they recommended to me that we take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. And after thought and prayer, and I said, yeah, we've got to do that. I mean, we've just got to send the message, if nothing else, that hey, we're here. We're not just a dumb pipe panic putting through any content that you want, and that we're offended in our communities by what was said, and this is the only recourse that we have. Now, the irony of it is we had been talking to ABC for 3 days about this and airing our concerns. And so we put out a press release saying that we are going to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air until things cool down. ABC put out a press release 10 minutes later saying they were taking Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Now, it wasn't Nexstar that, brought Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, ABC, if you know anything about ABC, they don't make any decision in 15 minutes. This is something that was in the works, and it just so happened if we'd waited 20 minutes, they would have put their press release out and ours would have been irrelevant. Now, I fully acknowledge that a good part of America did not agree with our decision. I know that because I got 9 death threats and about 3,500 personal emails and voice messages, and the company got over 20,000. And so, and people reached out to my children and my wife and posted addresses of where everybody lives. Just all the things that you can do as a keyboard warrior, and which is certainly everybody's right, but you notice we have security around the building, and that's just kind of the cost of what you have to do. It was hard, right? I didn't, we can talk about retrans, hopefully, because Abilene was the eye of the storm of that back in 2005. But we've made decisions that have been unpopular before, and I've heard from people and been called all the names. But the vitriol behind this was something I had never imagined and, quite frankly, underestimated. What people would call me, what people would call my son, what people would just call our company. People would wish for my demise or even tell me how they were going to do it, right? And so it was a hard time to go through, and we finally restored Kimmel on at the end of the week. He came back, and things have moved on, certainly, but it certainly was a time that kind of tried our conviction. But we did have conviction that this was the right thing to do, and would probably still do it again today.
Well, I'm certainly sorry for the threats and whatnot that have been against you and your family. And I'm going to ask you a personal question. How do you personally handle that heap that comes on you? How do you deal with that as the CEO? I mean, do you just have to have tough skin, or is there just a something you do regularly, working out and doing things differently? How do you handle that type of pressure?
Well, as a CEO, there's really nobody in the company at peer level for me to go talk to, right? So I talk to members of my board of directors. I have a couple of other CEOs in the industry that I'm, respect their opinion, and so we can have dialogue. Spend a lot of time talking to my wife and my kids about this at home. And my wife has been my best supporter. She's been a great weather vane for me as well. She didn't initially agree with the decision that we made and was not shy about telling me that. So
really,
but I think that's okay. I mean, everybody's entitled to an opinion, and everybody's perception has become their reality, right? All of us, and I understand that as well. So I think it you have to rely on your faith in yourself, your faith in your convictions as well. And hopefully we'll see you through.
I've noticed on our local station that anytime there is an election that goes on, everybody gets to have a chance to talk. There's a lot of talking going on and not enough listening. How do you think we solve this issue of we're on one side and we're on the other? We've got a closed government. I mean, how do we fix this thing? What do we as individuals do? What can we do in our respective industries?
Well, what we've tried to do at Nexstar is create a vehicle that mirrors what we do in our local markets, which is we took the WGN America cable channel that was airing reruns way back in the day. Used to air the Cubs games. It's funny, we would do research on WGN. What do you think of WGN America? Oh, never miss a Cubs game. Well, they haven't been on for 15 years, but I appreciate your support. But we were airing, Blue Bloods and reruns of, shows and things like that. And I'd meet with the cable and satellite companies, and they said, there's nothing distinctive about your channel. I got 99 cable channels that all have some sort of scripted entertainment reruns. And I really don't care if I carry it, but I really don't want to pay for it anymore. And I said, okay, well, we're going to pivot this to something that we think will have more value to you, which is using the journalists of the Nexstar Nation to power and provide the underpinning and the foundation for turning WGN America into a national cable network. And so, I don't know, people probably don't know, but we employ over 5,500 journalists across the country. Nexstar employs more local journalists in the United States than any other journalistic organization in the world. And they do what they do here in Abilene, and we do it in Lubbock, and we do it in Amarillo, and we do it in Austin and Brownsville, and 100 markets around the country, and which is try and report the news, right? There's no spin, there's no opinion, and we're just trying to get the facts out. And I said, why we can build News Nation into that, and so. We did. I, converted a entertainment network to a news network right in the middle of COVID. We built a studio in Chicago, and the mission was to, not unlike the mission of CNN out of Ted Turner's mouth 50 years ago, is we want to provide an honest take on the news, provide for respectful disagreement of opinion, tell you something that you didn't hear from everybody else, or maybe give you a different way to think about things. But we're going to provide the information and let you make the decision. We're not going to have shouting matches, even though that's an easier way to grow ratings, to just people can't turn away from it. But I said, I got to look at the guy shaving in the mirror every morning, and that's not what I want to do. So respectful debate, honest journalism, and using this depth and breadth of reporters that we have across the country. So when the tornado goes through Moore, Oklahoma, which it seems like it does about every 3 years or so, we have an NBC affiliate there that can be in Moore, Oklahoma, reporting live to the nation as what's going on, and he or she, meaning the reporter, knows the street names, knows the public officials, and can provide more ground level information that might be of context to viewers all around the country before the big networks can charter a plane and parachute a correspondent. And I had a TV station in Oklahoma City during the bombing, and I was there. We were downtown, and it was what the nation never saw was the local journalism that was being done. It's like, here, go here to volunteer this. You want to donate this. You want to drop off clothing. You want to whatever needs to be done. It was the national news networks were reporting on the national tragedy, but in the local marketplace, they were helping people, shepherd resources to where they could do the most good. So we feel very good about hopefully. I said this started as a counter-programming strategy. Now it's kind of become my passion project, right? And as I'm closer to 70 than I am to 60, it's probably part of my legacy that I think about now. But, we have built a cable news channel now that is competitive with CNN, beats CNN from time to time, beats MSNBC a lot of the time. But we're 5 years old, and those MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News are anywhere between 25 and 50 years old, and we're building an audience, one viewer at a time. But it's our local TV stations that are the backbone, that were the inspiration for this. And again, if we can change the way that people talk to one another in the country, and we can reintroduce some civility, I guess I'm either Pollyanna enough or romantic enough to think that that still matters, and that we can change this debate, and that you can disagree with someone without having them be your mortal enemy. It's not binary. I mean, we can agree on a lot of things and disagree on a few, and it's amazing the things that we can agree on as a country. And I said, that's center lane, that 60% of the country is the folks that I want to speak to with News Nation, because that's the largest voting bloc. That's the largest bloc of citizenry. But the debate has been hijacked by the 20% on the right and the 20% on the left, and they've taken all the air out of the room. And so we're trying to restore that. We have a rhetorician on staff that we hired from the Vatican. And so her full-time job is to look at stories we do, reports that we do, things that we write, and point out the conscious bias, but even more importantly, the unconscious bias. And she recently handed me a piece of AP copy, and I'm not here to bash AP, but just the Associated Press, which is kind of the wire service for the industry. And she handed me this piece of paper and showed me it was a news story that they had just sent out to all of their subscribers, and it was a sea of red ink. She said, well, this is a pejorative adjective. This is an unsubstantiated fact here. This is somebody's opinion, but it's not clearly called that. And I said, so if that's AP, you can imagine, this is a full-time, but our job is to make sure that balance isn't boring, right? And so we've hired some personalities, Chris Cuomo and Leland Vittert and others that can provide some commentary and context on the news in the evening hours. But we're now 5 years up and running, and I'm very proud of the work we've done. When I started, we spent $20 million on a on-air campaign and an overall publicity campaign to introduce the country to News Nation. And we did awareness studies afterwards and found out that 11% of the country knew who we were. So that's what we got for our $20 million. 5 years later, that 11% is up to about 40%, a little over 40%. But among news viewers, it's up to 60%. So I'm often pleased but never satisfied. I think I've made a career out of that. But we had tremendous progress, but we still got to knock on 4 out of 10 doors in America and introduce ourselves. So that's the job.
Wow. Sounds like that baby's growing up. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're at the end of our conversation, and I really do appreciate you coming and sharing, because me personally, just seeing you make tough decisions it's not easy. And like you said, your wife didn't agree with you. But sometimes it's your best companion can give you insights. I really do appreciate it, not only for our school, but for the community, the big country, because we are, I think, hardworking people, salt of the earth people. But at the same time, I think the conversations we have with each other is the way things ought to happen, as opposed to what we see, unfortunately, on other TV shows. So thank you for doing that. I do have some gifts for you. One of them is underneath this table, but then one is right here on the table. And it is a ledger book that shows you still being owed some money from a company in Florida. I don't know if you ever collect. If you need help with that, I can help you with collections. But this is just a tribute to you and what you've done for us out here. And we really do appreciate you coming and sharing.